rightly said about this whole, you know, the that it's now cool to have a trans child, you know, and I mean, so it's getting such a mess at this stage that I think that FINA have done the right thing. They might have gone about it in the wrong way, but they did the right thing. Isolt, I hope now we're going to move into our final part of the show because we're running over time. We have to get through this because it's very, very important. This is our sports movie magic section. I should say there's Paco Sanz. Thank you. I said science, it's actually Sanz. Thank you very much to Joel Amarin who sent it in to me. Our movie, of course, this week, we said last week what we're going to watch. Andrew Flint knows this bloody movie. He watched it already this weekend, so he should be here to speak about it. And it is Cool Runnings. Now, Cool Runnings, of course, released in 93. It's based on the Calgary Olympics tale, 1988 tale of the Jamaican bobsled team. It's a little bit free and easy with the actual facts. When you watch the story about it, it's actually it's even better, actually, the reality of it, how they developed and so on. So these like great athletes, they kept together. And of course, the whole thing was they're coming from like Jamaica, which doesn't have snow. So it's like training how to prepare, and of course, it's a great story. But Isolde, okay, how did you first come to it as a child, and has it aged well?
I'm going to say this. I'm fairly sure if I go home and I go through, my parents are basically keeping all of my stuff for posterity in case, I don't know why they're keeping my stuff. Look, basically, they didn't feel like throwing it out, and my brother's stuff is all being kept in an altar. So. But I'm fairly sure if I go home, I would still have this on video. Cool Runnings is up there with probably one of the greatest sports movies of all time, and I'll tell you why. Because I have a lot of reasons for this. It is everything you want in a story when it comes from the very beginning being athletes who suffer, in this case, a catastrophic fall for all of them in a qualification. So they end up not being able to compete. I'm not going to ruin the story for everyone. Everyone knows Cool Runnings. End up not going through and qualifying to compete in the Olympics, the Summer Olympics. So as you naturally would do when adversity comes your way, you decide, so I can't go to the Summer Olympics. How about through seeing the picture of a bobsleigh former competitor in the office of your father, if I remember rightly, you suddenly go, I know what I'll do. I'll try out the Winter Olympics. And the thing is, this is loosely based, as you said, on the first Jamaican participants in bobsleigh. And I think it's a really good life lesson in the whole way through the film. You have the training, the coming up with different methods. You then have, when they actually get to the competition stage, they try to emulate things they see the better team, the West Germans, obviously were they the West Germans? They were the West Germans, or were they East Germans?
East Germans.
East Germans.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember which would be the bad guys. The East Germans. So they try to emulate them initially, and then they realize that that's not going to work. So then they go down the route of being true to themselves. Now, being true to themselves comes at the cost of them eventually, very sadly, carrying their bobsleigh over the line. But it's also then about the resilience and the power of sport. So you have it all in one film. It's actually
It is.
wonderful. You also have a pet egg, because if you don't have a lucky egg, what do you have in life? And that is obviously a metaphor for the symbol you cling on to for the purposes of feeling better about yourself, even though it's doing absolutely nothing for you. It's everything about this film is really, really good. And I was earlier being advised that some of the footage, because Brian was able to give a synopsis of it that was much better than mine, that they used some actual footage from the Jamaican bobsleigh team, which just makes it even better. But I think it's one of those films that has a timeless quality. There is a Cool Runnings too, not as timeless, but there's a timeless quality in that the moral of the story and the lessons that are in it are ones you can apply to any era. And I also do have a soft spot for this film as an adult because of the fact that I'm involved with the Irish Bobsleigh and Skeleton Association. We do not have ice apart from once every 3 years at Christmas and snow, but we have a bobsleigh team, mostly it comprises of Americans who live in places with actual snow. But we do have a skeleton athlete, and he trains on a dry track here. So it's like to have that mental ability to do something that's so alien to your background, but to apply your skills, which is what they did, they applied their ability to run. They applied their fast twitch muscle ability and went, what else can we do if we can't do what we've always done? And what's our other option? And again, like, as you might be able to tell, I think this is a really wonderful film. It's everything you want kids to learn in a film.
Okay, before I ask you to give you your rating first, this is the crash. This is, as Isa said, they mixed actual footage of the event
Mm.
with, of course, the movie part of it. And one thing is that the guys said they didn't know it actually crashed until they got the smell of the burning fiberglass within their helmet, because, of course, they crashed at 130 kilometers per hour, and for 600 meters, they're like, this is the way they were. Their helmets are scraping against the ice. Now, I know that some of the students that I work with from many, many different countries, they actually took part in a push start competition, bob push, and they really enjoyed it. Of course, there are many differences. They were specialists in two-man bob, and there were other countries as well from the Caribbean, like the U.S. Virgin Islands, Netherlands, Antilles. They took part in it as well. But their two-man, they went into the four-man bob. Just basically, well, we have a chance, and they went into it. Of course, there were issues that they weren't going to be allowed to take part in the four-man bob. But one of the people, well, you see that Prince Albert of Monaco, who was also competing, he said no, that they should be able to do it. They weren't as good as the movie said they were, as in like they weren't going to win or medal or something like that. But again, the romance of it was lovely. And of course, the most important thing as well, when we look at this, it's just the fact that, as Cecil said, it's a lovely, nice moral thing of like, you need to believe in yourselves. And the whole thing where they didn't have the money, but they worked hard to get the money. They sacrificed, they went, they trained. It's something that sport really is about. It's going and competing, and that's the whole thing, that the Olympics are always about going and competing, showing your best. To be an Olympian is an amazing thing. And sorry, so I was going to finish off that saying that it's also the situation where we say that, that if you have something to hold and to kiss, like, an egg, is very important as well.
It's also interesting that, just to bring up, we say a lot about how you see people, even if they're not winning, to see, to be, to, like, the mantra for Irish sports media for the last few years. They've been running a campaign, can't see, can't be, for female athletes. The Jamaican women's team entered in the 2018, I think, I could be wrong, it's the first time their female participants went with the bobsleigh team. And I think it's amazing, like, that you can, a sport that you would not naturally associate with a country, it's not necessarily within their culture, but they have the best athletes in terms of speed and power within that in the world, that the crossover has happened. And I just think, yeah, do you want my rating? Because I think we all know what it's getting here.
Okay, look, you're right in terms of women. They had the two-woman bob. So they competed, as you mentioned, the first time in 2018. They finished 19th. Okay, Isel, your rating.
So I'm also giving Andrew's rating on his behalf. So we're giving it 20 out of 20. So that's 2 10s. Solid film. You're not going to get better than this. I don't know how you're going to beat this unless we're doing Bend It Like Beckham. And I think after this week's show, we may need to give that a few weeks.
Okay, so basically, so you're saying that it's 10 out of 10. Andrew also saying, so he says not going to get better than this. Andrew had said that it is 10 out of 10 as well. So you are dead right. And again, so many interesting ones. I mean, the characters they put for it, I mean, they were looking for more serious male actors, especially for the Irv Blitzer, who was John Candy, of course, one of his last roles in cinema. They were going to get Kurt Russell or Scott Glenn. Do you think, and we discussed this before, Isel, do you think that the fact that they actually, they got John Candy to play it, that made the movie even better? Because he was a great comic turn, as well as being someone who was a little bit damaged as well.
I think the cast was actually spot on throughout. You had the mix of characters who could kind of you had like the purely comedic side, and then it just all worked really well. I personally, I find any sports film, it always helps when you have someone who's telling people about sports who looks like they are about to keel over from a heart attack at any moment. It adds to the comic value that anything they say is going to be kind of in your head. You go, really, can I buy this character? it's just a wonderful feel-good film, because even though you find yourself heartbroken for them, you still see that level of sport is more than winning. It's just a brilliant film.
That I was muted. That was, excuse me. Thank you very much, Cecil. Yeah, I was talking about not knowing that no one was listening to me, which probably me in silence is actually better. The whole situation is that they the movie did take liberties of what actually happened, but at the same time, it
Yeah.
just shows that the resilience of the human spirit and that sort of need just to go and compete. Yes, you might be laughed at. Yes, you might be knocked down, but the most important thing is just to go and goddamn compete, have fun, show your best self, and do as well as you can. I always said it like Gisela when I said that we were players 3 years ago at the World Games in Ireland, and we knew we were up against it from every single team. We're playing the Australians who were basically they had a video analyst, they had nutritionists, they had a masseur with them. Our guys were a couple of standing around having a smoke at half time. I mean, this is real old school Irish stuff. But I said to them, if you crawl off the field, I mean, if you give everything you can and come off the field exhausted and we lose, okay, but at least you gave your all. You can't fault that. The problem was a lot of them actually crawled off the field, but that was because they were after having cigarettes before the match. That was a different thing. Okay, so 10 out of 10 on that. The movie for next week, it's a new one out because we did two old school ones. We did one from back in '89, one from '93. This latest one from Cool Runnings. Um, this one's a new one. I don't know if you've seen Hustle yet with Adam Sandler.
I don't think I've seen Hustle.
No. Well,
Maybe I
I
have.
watched this past week. Have a look. It's a basketball one. It's very much NBA produced. It's kind of like Draft Day, the American football one, which was
Okay.
basically a promo filler for the NFL. But have a look at it. We'll tell Andrew Flynn to have a look at it as well. We won't have Andy Mack back with us, unfortunately. He's traveling next week as well. He's traveling this week as well. Um, he's a traveler, but not a Tyson Fury type of traveler, but he is one of them. And that's a really bad joke. I get sanctioned for that. But folks, right now, I know he's going to hang up for just one moment. So I will say goodbye for now. Thank you very, very much. Isel, thank you too as well for brilliant performance. Blinder today. Brian didn't want to come on.
No, because we had lost Andrew midway, I have just joined the Cool Runnings fan here. He is here
Oh, do you know
beside me.
what? Let's get his view. If you can turn the camera back, Brian, because I think we'll get an even one now.
We'll let Brian give his view on Cool Runnings.
Brian, great to finally speak with you, and we've heard your voice.
Infamous.
Lovely. So you're going live across the world. There's a lot of people watching. There's actually people watching. There's people watching the clip of this. Brian, give us your take on Cool Runnings and your mark out of 10.
Oh, that's my take. Okay. I'm torn. Do I talk about the underdog story, or do I focus on I'll controversial some of the tropes that might be a little bit in it, but I'm going to focus on the underdog story. Without getting political on it. For me, growing up, we actually embodied the feel the rhythm, feel the ride into our kind of early music days. So I played in a band. So that was actually a big motivation as a youngster growing up. So for me, that was the kind of underdog story of someone who didn't belong in a certain place, embodying that and actually going up to feel like you could actually belong on a main stage. So like I took like bobsleigh and put it onto a musical sense, and that inspired us. So for me, score though, it's hard to give it anything less than an 8.
Oh, 8.
It's
I gave it a 10. How are we even compatible? Sorry, separate.
The only reason I didn't bring it up is because I think there's got some
give us your tropes.
It has some things like some of the white savior kind of moments, and it has some kind of a little bit of some tropes that are kind of when you look back at it now, going, oh, is it a bit small but insensitive? But I mean, you have to go looking for it, I think. But that's the only thing, a bit of revisionist history maybe. But other than that, if I took that aside, it would be a 10.
Yeah, that's really good though. No, I think he's dead on that, because it is the kind of thing where the white hero comes in and he saves them.
Was it a thing of its era though? That if we look back, can we see that in everything now?
But that's
wait, hold on. I think, but we have to look at it. We say, okay, Major League, of course, we had Pedro Serrano, who was from Cuba, and they're like the reason why they didn't like he was sort of being pushed around because his religion was voodoo, and he had Jobu, and then we had that pretty moment when the old pitcher turns around and drinks the rum and goes like he said, well, fuck you, Jobu, and then like goes out and he gets hit with a baseball bat and so on. So I think that's fine. I think that's fine, but I would like I didn't give my vote last week on, of course, on Major League, but I would also say the Major League was about a 7 or an 8. I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed the movie. Cool Runnings I saw in Canada in '96 was actually we were on a road trip, and I sat and watched it, and I was like, this is really cool. Like it was actually on the bus, on the video on the bus, and they played it on the bus. I'd go again. I'd go with 8. I'd go with 8 first. It's a very good movie, but it's not perfect. Even though the soundtrack, I think it was Jimmy Cliff had. I can see clearly now.
He did the Johnny Cash song. He redid which Johnny Cash song is done on it? On Cool Runnings. There's a Johnny Cash song. Google it there. There's a Johnny Cash
on it.
It's a brilliant soundtrack.
Well, I mean, everything. Like I mean. Hans Zimmer actually the brilliant. Yeah, he is. I think Hans Zimmer is just brilliant. I mean, all the things from The Last Samurai and all the movies he has scored were brilliant, and he was involved in this as well. And I mean, just Johnny Nash's, not Johnny Cash's. I can see clearly now.
Oh God.
Yeah, so Johnny. So it's Jimmy. I knew it was Jimmy Cliff, but and even better, folks, if you want to have a really, really good cover of a cover, and I would say Hot House Flowers, I can see clearly now, is even better.
Ooh.
Well, being Irish, we can't argue with that.
We can't. No, that seems like a solid shout. Very solid shout.
So I think. Listen, I'll tell you what, Isolde, if Brian's okay, we'll grab him on next week to give his view on Hustle.
Yes, because he's going to have to watch it.
I'll have to watch it.
So he might.
That's brilliant.
Totally different. Like I just look at things and I'm like, there was a lucky egg. What's not to like?
And I mean, I'm always very, very careful because I'm always afraid, because when we're covering this movie, I'm so afraid to do sort of like a bad Jamaican accent. Tim warned me, said, Dad, don't do a Jamaican accent. But that moment when they crash and he's like, Sanka, yeah, dead. And then he goes, no, man. Like that, I just think it's so funny. I think it's so funny. And then like, when you say "kiss me, lucky egg," you know, and in Russian, by the way, when you say the word "egg" in Russian has a completely different connotation. So when one man asks another man to kiss his egg, it's yeah, you can understand.
Problem.
Well, I thought that was kids when you were like if you were a nerd or a geek growing up, which I kind of was, and that part where they're looking in the mirror and it's like I see pride, I see power. A lot of kids, that's a really empowering moment. It's like that's how you should look at yourself.
It is, and it's a great moment then when he walks out and he walks straight into the bar and launches himself into the East Germans and starts beating them. It's great. It has everything in the movie for kids. It's also very clean. There's nothing bad about it. It's all very hee hee ha ha. So it's a perfect Disney movie and ideal. So